Alright, so this video is going to finish out Chapter 13, Part 1. We're going to take a look at three more parts of the brain. We're going to look at the diencephalon, the brainstem, and the cerebellum. And so the diencephalon is one of the tissues that comes from the prosencephalon, and the diencephalon actually maintains its name. All the others have other names like cerebrum and brainstem, but the diencephalon, we still call it that today in the adult structure. And so there's four parts. Okay, you can see that they all have thalamus in them. And so we're going to take a look at the four parts of the diencephalon. It's kind of within the cerebrum. So we have the thalamus, which is actually a collection of nuclei. Remember that nuclei are just a collection of cell bodies in the central nervous system. And it's going to be between the cerebral cortex, which was the outer portion of the cerebrum, and the rest of the nervous system. So it's kind of a relay station. The thalamus is the largest part of the diencephalon, and so it relays information from all of your sensory information with the exception of olfactory, which is smell. So like your touch, your vision, your taste, your hearing, all of those are going to go through the thalamus. And so it's also involved in mood and emotions. It's associated with fear and rage, and that's going to be because of some of the other parts that are connected to it. And so the hypothalamus, hypo means low, and so it's kind of just below the thalamus. So you have the thalamus here, and then you have the hypothalamus there. And once again, it's just a collection of nuclei. And so hypothalamus equals homeostasis. You're also going to see the hypothalamus when you cover the endocrine system, because there is a major relationship between the autonomic nervous system, which regulates homeostasis, and the endocrine system, which regulates homeostasis with hormones. And so the hypothalamus is actually part of both of them. And so it regulates the release of hormones by the anterior pituitary. So this is why it's part of the endocrine system. It's a hormone that releases hormones. It's a gland that releases hormones that controls another gland. And so through the regulation of the anterior pituitary, it's able to influence things like metabolism, reproduction, response to stress, urine production, and that has to do with the specific hormones that are released. And the hypothalamus just regulates general control mechanisms, things like your heart rate, your digestion rate, temperature regulation, things like hunger and thirst, things like even your sex drive, relaxation after eating, the rage, fear, sleep-wake cycle. So you can see that there's a long list of functions that your hypothalamus regulates, and it's all part of your homeostatic control. There's also some connections with your memory and emotions because the hypothalamus was part of your limbic system. So for a small structure, it actually is responsible for a lot of functions. The subthalamus contains some of those brain nuclei which help in motor function. The epithalamus includes the pineal gland, and the pineal gland is responsible for the production of melatonin, and that's going to help with your sleep-wake patterns, kind of what we call our circadian rhythms. The pineal gland is named because it looks like a little pine cone, and you can see that it's a small structure here. Okay, there's my thalamus, there's my hypothalamus. The epithalamus is kind of behind it, and it also has the habenula, or habenula, and that's going to be involved in the sense of smell and connecting it to your emotions. So sometimes if you were to smell like a perfume, it might remind you of a family member that maybe had passed on or something like that, or maybe it takes you back to a vacation that you were a part of, but it connects your smell to your emotions. And then our third brain part that we're going to be covering is the brainstem. So the brainstem actually comes from two different types of vesicles. Early on in embryonic development, you have the mesencephalon, which became the membrane and kind of stayed the membrane. This was the one that did not differentiate further from the primary vesicles. And then you have your rhombencephalon, which differentiated. You had your pons and the medulla. The pons and the cerebellum came from the mesencephalon, and then the medulla came from the myeloencephalon, or the myelencephalon. And so the brainstem, it really has three main parts: the pons, the midbrain, and the medulla. Then it also has the reticular formation, which kind of runs through all of it. And so the medulla oblongata, this is going to be the one that connects the brainstem to the spinal cord, you can see here. So it's going to be in this area of the brainstem. There's the spinal cord where it connects. And so the medulla oblongata is important for just general life-sustaining functions with heart, breathing, some basic reflexes like vomiting, coughing. So this is kind of a mega control center for just basic life processes. We have the pons, which is kind of the bump, and the pons was the one that was also produced with the cerebellum. And if we look at a picture, the pons is here, and you can see that there's a very close relationship between the pons and the cerebellum, because this is going to be our connector between the brainstem and the cerebellum. You can see here how they're kind of attached to each other. And so it's going to relay information from the cerebrum to the cerebellum. It's kind of like a go-between the two parts of the brain. It also is controlling REM sleep, and along with the medulla, it helps regulate your breathing. And then the midbrain is going to be this portion up here. It's kind of connected to the thalamus. And so the midbrain plays a role in reflex movements as well as an auditory pathway for hearing. The reticular formation, like I mentioned, it kind of runs through the whole brain stem. It's actually some gray matter that goes throughout. It's going to receive axons from nerves in the face, and it's also going to be involved in sleep-wake cycles. So it's just kind of like a go-between pathway between the spinal cord and the brain. And then the last part that we're going to talk about is the cerebellum, which literally means kind of little brain. So this was also formed from the rhombencephalon, along with the pons. The metencephalon is what differentiated into the cerebellum and the pons. So like the cerebrum, you have the grooves and kind of the valleys and the bumpy areas. Okay, so you have the ridges like the gyri and the sulci, which are the valleys, the part that sinks in. And so the cerebellum is very much responsible for kind of analyzing information. So it kind of takes the information from the cerebrum, and it takes the sensory information from the peripheral nervous system, and it kind of compares the two and helps us adjust. So its main job is going to be kind of balance and motor coordination. So it is connected to the brain stem, kind of sits on top of that fourth ventricle, which we're going to talk about in part 2, and so that's this cavity here. Inside of the cerebellum is this white matter called the arbor vitae, or the tree of life, and so it's just going to be those axons within it, and it's going to be just an area where you can have information going between the cerebellum and the brain stem there. And so it does play a major role in balance. So like if you're walking along a bumpy road, it kind of helps analyze the information from the cerebrum and the senses to help you adjust. So it allows for smooth movements. It controls your posture, your fine motor coordination, your bigger movements. And so it allows you to kind of have smooth, controlled movements. It also is responsible for helping us learn complex movements like dances and things like that. Or something like this action where you have not only balance but motor coordination. It kind of combines the two together and allows you to do those complex tasks. So this is just kind of a final breakdown, a final summary of your main parts. So the brain is broken up into 4 main parts. So those are here. It kind of is an overall review sheet, might be a great thing to study. And then I've also posted some videos that you can watch. Okay, there's several about the parts of the brain and how it works. There's some about the embryonic development, so I would encourage you to watch those. There's also some other clips and animations on Moodle that are short and easy to watch. And that is going to wrap up Chapter 13, Part 1. And we're going to pick up with Part 2 in our next videos.